it is a little cold down here, so I'm gonna try and be quick. I want to talk about A Memory Called Empire. Let me grab it for you. A Memory Called Empire. So I finished this like a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks. I've talked about it a little tiny bit in my weekly chats. If you watch those, you know that I enjoyed this. But I thought I would do a little bit longer of a review, and I'm gonna do my whole spoiler-free and then a little bit of spoilers. So if you want to be spoiled on some things, then you can check out the spoiler section. Or if you've already read it and you want to see how I interpreted certain things. So let me give you the synopsis, because I find finding a synopsis of this to be a little confusing because the book is a little confusing. This is a sci-fi, but it's a little bit more like a fantasy set in space that uses science fiction elements. It's not very much of a hard sci-fi. We don't get the science explained to us, and that works really well for me. That is the type of sci-fi that I have found that I enjoy. But for purists, this is probably not considered a sci-fi because it doesn't explain the science. I have learned recently that there are some purists who don't count it if it doesn't explain the science. I don't care. I just want a good story, and I like stories set in space. So I also like stories that follow female characters, and this is a female-driven story for the most part. Okay, so this is a lot. This is a political intrigue with a murder mystery element and a discussion of colonization and empires. So that's what the gist of this is. And interestingly enough, I have seen it recommended for the Locked Tomb fans, and I can kind of see that in some aspects. And I think the main reason that it gets recommended for Locked Tomb fans is because we have weird names, and we have a memory brain kind of thing. So it's got some Harrow the Ninth elements. We have a little bit of an unreliable narrator in certain aspects of the book, and we have lesbians in space. We don't have any magic. We're not dealing a lot with religion like we are in the Locked Tomb. This is much more politically driven. And I think that makes a big difference. The tone is entirely different. While Gideon the Ninth is dealing with some heavy things, I use Gideon the Ninth for the Locked Tomb. The whole Locked Tomb series is dealing with some heavy topics. It has this sense of brevity and humor about it, and it's a little weird. Like, this is a little weird, but it's not in the same aspect that the Locked Tomb is weird. So I think this is where that recommendation splits. Though I do think that a lot of people that like Gideon the Ninth are people that will like this. I don't think it's necessarily because these can be comps. So seeing them in comp lists is a little weird from my perspective. But I do think if you like Harrow, you'll like this. So essentially we're following Mahit Desmer, and she is an ambassador from a small mining station whose name I cannot remember at the moment. But this station it's a space station, so they don't have a planet, and they mine on this space station. They don't have an atmosphere, they don't have any of these things, and that makes her experience growing up very different than the Empire, which is Texcalan, and that one I remember because it gets mentioned a ton. So she gets asked on very short notice to become the ambassador to Texcalan from her station. And it basically gets demanded of her from the Empire. This is kind of rare. There's only been one other ambassador to the Empire. And that ambassador, no one really knows what happened to him until Mahit gets there. She has an assumption that he is dead, but she's not sure. It does say this on the back, that the previous ambassador was murdered. So this is not a spoiler. Once she gets there, she has this traumatic experience happen, and all of her ability to communicate with any of her information to the Empire and all of the stuff that she doesn't know on her own is cut off. And then because that is cut off, she then is kind of at a loss. Also, because this empire is very strict about access to certain things and very much views themselves as the best of the best as far as technology and society and all of these things, they do not allow her to have access to things. She has to have a liaison, and this liaison has to read and decode all of her mail. She cannot teach Mahit how to do it. She just has to do it for her. Mahit's not allowed to have access to open doors because she doesn't have what's called a cloud hook, which is like this kind of bionic thing that goes like over their eye. It gives them like it gives them access to the news and socials, and basically it's like having your phone, you know, the super sci-fi having your phone in your eyes type thing. And she needs that to be able to access most things. So she has this liaison named Three Seagrass, which is why I said the naming system is very interesting. I think I said that anyway. I meant to say it. And Three Seagrass and Mahit kind of become a little bit of friends, and they end up uncovering a plot they end up uncovering what the plot was to murder the previous ambassador. This drags Mahit into everything. She ends up in the middle of this political whirlwind between the emperor and a military leader who wants to take over for the emperor, and all of this civil unrest, and it becomes very tangled with Mahit kind of stuck in the center and trying to figure out what is going on and keep herself safe in a society that she is considered a barbarian in. So it gets really interesting on those aspects of it. I really liked the discussions of colonialism and kind of how this society has set up itself to be the standard and is essentially sending out materials that makes them look better, even better than they are, to the outlying planets and stations, so that they want to be annexed into this empire so that they have access to the technology and to this and to that. But all of these people, when they come there, don't have this. If they are allowed to come there, they don't have access to all of these things. They just end up being a resource for the empire. And that obviously is obvious. This thing happens in fantasy books and stuff all the time, and it happens in real life. So it's very much commentary, and it might be a little bit blunt to some people, but I really enjoyed it. I don't think it was very heavy-handed. I think it was just kind of, it was showing very much how Mahit felt in that system, where she like wanted to be part of this society and to be part of the empire and to be part of the city. And then when she got it, she was like, holy shit, this is fucked up. There are so many things about this that are fucked up. And it's really, really interesting. The society views themselves to be incredibly intelligent, and they use poetry for a lot of their communication. And that aspect I think was really fascinating, where we had blocks of poems in the book that were either like historical poems or current poems, and people were using poems to incite riots and to hide messages that were anti-government, all written in this pretty prose. And I found that fascinating. They had a lot of poetry to their buildings, like odes to their architecture, to their civil advancement, to all of these different things that I was like, oh, that's actually like a really unique kind of way to have this societal advancement. So all of their names on Text Cologne were interesting because they had a number and then an object, like a noun. So sometimes it was like the ones I can remember, there was a lot of flowers. There, like 40 Larkspur was one of the guys. One Lightning was like the name of the military leader. I can't remember a lot of the other names, but they were the 19 Azalea. I think there was an Azalea, and then there was a 19. There's a lot of flowers. Like I said, there was like 3 Seagrass. There were all sorts of interesting names in here, and I found that aspect really unique in the naming system and how children were named. There was a young child named To Cartographer, and his mother called him Map. And I was like, that's actually freaking adorable. Like, I kind of love that. So that aspect of the culture was really interesting. She really went in depth into explaining the culture and building a culture. And I am a world building girly. Like, if you build a solid world, I am going to be obsessed with the book. It doesn't matter if it's like, if the story itself is like amazing. If you can build a really good world and give me just even the most basic story inside that world that fits, I'm going to really enjoy the book, because I just really like seeing how people envision different worlds to function. And I also really like political intrigue, so I liked this. There was parts of the book where we got into this kind of cyberpunky thing with this little group that's like a rebel group, and that was done, I thought, really, really well. And I was like, hold up, I need more of these people. Like, give me a book about these people because these people are fascinating. And I loved that. The other thing we really did was this integration of the AI and the city kind of being, everything about the city being a monitoring system, this big brother type idea where the city was constantly interacting with everybody's cloud hooks and was controlling people's access to things, all under this algorithm written by this guy something Pearl, who basically made this algorithm and was potentially using it to control people. The soldiers in the city were almost like a hive mind, but they were definitely people. And so there was this line of investigation that could not be answered of how are these military people made? Like the city guards, like, are, because people go into the service and then something happens and nobody really knows what exactly it is, but they become like a hive mind, giving me like Borg vibes. And I was really enjoying that aspect of. There were so many different things in here that I was like, oh my God, this is like so unique and so creative, that I was a little bit disappointed by the ending. I think the ending didn't wow me the way that I wanted it to, but I kept intrigued throughout this whole book. I did a lot of underlining because I felt like I needed to understand things. So I have a lot of things underlined so that I can go back and reread it, just so I can be like, okay, this was important and that was important. And there was just so many things about propaganda and city-states that I think it felt a little timely, which was interesting. Yeah, and I think the main fascinating thing for me about this is maybe a mild spoiler, but I think it's really important, is that because it's important to the story, it's not given in the synopsis, but I think it's important to the story, and you do learn about it very early. So Mahit's station has this technology that they use that is it's a cognitive implant, and essentially everyone who's in some sort of position of power, typically they're pilots because piloting is most important to their society, gets this implant, and this implant records all of their memories. It basically makes a snapshot of them, and then at certain points in time they go and they update the other version of that. Is called an imago, the other version of that sits in a drawer, and they update it so that then there'll be a really recently updated version of them that can then be implanted into the next person to take that position. So that's their training. They get all of the memories of this person, and that results in this really weird integration of personalities at some point, because you have to be able to integrate them or you'll just basically lose yourself entirely. So that has resulted in their society having this amazing culture of psychotherapy, because you have to be completely mentally and emotionally stable to be able to handle integrating someone else's personality into yours, to survive that mentally and to remain yourself. So there's this constant conversation of how big is your definition of you throughout the book. And that type of stuff always makes me uncomfortable. Anything to do with memory and altering memories, because memories are so subjective. There are so many things that I think that I remember that I have found out later that actually was something that somebody just told me so many times that I built this memory of it in my brain. And then knowing whether or not that memory was actually accurate, like what was that person telling me so many times, that what is my memory and what is the thing that they told me? And that stresses me out at the same time as fascinates me. Brains are weird. I say it constantly. I have a friend who is a sleep tech, and she's like sending me pictures of like brain waves and stuff at night sometimes, and I'm like, oh my God, brains are so freaking weird. I did a lot of my PhD research on fish brain development, so brains are fascinating and weird to me. So I just needed to throw that up there. So that's my non-spoilery bit. I really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to get to the second book. I'm not planning on picking up it this year. I will be going into it next year, and I am going to go into a little series thing here soon, just for the end of the year, to kind of recap what I've read for series and what I'm going to be doing. But this is definitely going to be high up on my list. So that is the end of my non-spoilery bit. I do want to jump into some spoilers. So if you pulling dog hair off myself real quick. If you have stayed here this long, I really appreciate it. Don't feel obligated to stay for the rest. If you like this video, give it a like, give me a subscribe. I do these things pretty regularly. I try to do a review every Saturday. So stick around, maybe you'll find something you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. And if you do want to stay, I'm going to start with spoilers now. Okay, so some spoilers. When Mahit sees her, it's Yixander, Ysander. I cannot pronounce his name. I will put it on the screen, but I cannot pronounce his name. I have no idea how to say it. I only know Texkalon because I listened to a little bit of the audio in an audio sample, so I got the pronunciation of Texkalon at least. So, when she sees his body, basically her imago shorts, and her imago is like 10 years outdated or 15 years outdated or something like that, because I'm just gonna call him Xander. He refuses to go back to update it because he has gotten himself massively embroiled with these with this whole government, because he ends up having actually fallen in love with the emperor. So we get memories sometimes of him with the emperor and of him with the emperor's like #1 warrior, who ends up saving Mahit quite a few times and ends up being her saving grace. She develops a pretty strong relationship with this woman, and it basically like breaks him to see his body dead, which is fascinating from an aspect of how would that actually happen. Because first he's like stressed because he sees his body 15 years older. So if you were like, 25 and then suddenly saw yourself at 40, like, and it was actually you and you were seeing yourself, that might break somebody. And then to see yourself dead and but then have that like reaction of, wait, but I'm here, so am I or not? And then it goes kind of downhill from then. She's just all on her own. She ends up getting she gets this appointment with Sanders' liaison, who then gets like blown up in front of her. So now she's seen 2 dead bodies in the span of 24 hours, and she's never seen a dead body before. And then the city tries to kidnap her to take her to One Lightning, who is the military guy that's trying to usurp the empire. And so she's like everywhere, but she had managed to schedule a meeting with this high up warrior, and that kind of saved her, because this warrior is kind of viewed as like in the political hierarchy is extremely high. It would be like having an appointment with the Secretary of State, and that got her away from being kidnapped by the leader of the Pentagon, essentially. So I don't know if those are 2 different things, but if we were to split them, if they are, I think they're actually the same thing. But say we were to have it would basically be like one general saving her from another general, essentially. And so she ends up being able to get away from that. And I really should know more about the US military, shouldn't I? Besides the point. So she ends up like being able to be saved, but then she's a prisoner there. So then she's dealing with all this and she's getting away with a lot of things, with like kind of undercutting a lot of the security measures, because they view her as an unintelligent barbarian, and she's actually incredibly intelligent, because it's again that view of what people in one society that views themselves as better view people who are in a different culture and society and view them as uncivilized because they don't have the same things. So it kind of gives her this edge where she's able to kind of manipulate the system. She's able to go under the radar on all these things, and it gives her this little edge, which I found really interesting. In order to get the new implant, she does decide to go ahead and do it. And I saw a couple reviews where people were like, I saw a few reviews where people were like, I can't believe it took 200 pages for her to finally decide to do the thing she should have done in the beginning, which is to go get the imago and implant it in her head. And I'm like, hold on. Okay, so it's been established early in the book that the society in Texkalon does not only look down upon cognitive surgeries and anything to do with the brain, any alterations to do with the brain as immoral. They're also unlawful. So no one legally knows how to do a neural surgery. So of course that wouldn't be her first idea to get that imago and implant it in her brain, when 1, his body is under guard. 2, if anybody got caught cutting it out of his brain, they're going to be arrested and tried for treason. And 3, she does not have the know-how, because she's not a neuroscientist, to cut into his brain and remove it. If she had done that, she could have damaged it. She could have completely irrevocably messed it up. So the fact that it took them that long to figure out to do that makes sense within the world building and within the world. You cannot have the idea to do something when you're in a world that does not have those technologies. Like, she eventually figured out that one of the guys that was friends with her liaison, who agreed to help her, but she also felt bad bringing him into this because this is not his problem. She got him to do it, to remove it, and then he managed to have some contacts where she could get it installed, and that's where we get into the cyberpunky thing, because we have these people who are altering their bodies against the law in order to fight the law. And those chapters, I loved them. I loved those people. So we do get into that a little bit, but it's not something that a diplomat is going to come to an entirely new planet and know where to find people that operate on the black market. So her not doing that right away makes sense within the world, and to 2-star the book for that reason is completely wild to me. Because here, we like books that give our characters problems that are difficult to solve. We don't like, we being me, this channel, do not like it when things are easy for our protagonist, and this book did not make it easy for her. I liked a lot of the commentary in here. So I did underline this one conversation, and I happened to flip open to it because it just felt very kind of timely and very accurate to how people respond to things. So she's talking to this person who is a little bit intoxicated at this diplomatic event and is clearly a supporter of One Lightning. And she tries to like get a little bit of information out of him by just asking, because he's trying to subtly like convince her to join him or suss out if she's on his side. And so she's like, oh, what battles did One Lightning win? And this dude like loses his shit instantly. He's like, what the fuck kind of question is that? Fuck you, how dare you? And like just goes off on this tirade. And I was like, oh, what does that feel like to me? Because this book was written it was after 2016. This book was written because it was published in 2020. So clearly we know what was happening. And it was just fascinating to just ask a simple question, because this person was going off about how amazing of a warrior One Lightning was and how much of a great military leader they were. And just like, oh, what battles did he win? Like, I'm clearly not from here. What battles did he win? And the dude just like loses his shit on her. And I was like, that is so realistic, that it actually ended up putting her in physical danger. And so we do a lot in this book of putting our main character in physical danger and making it difficult for her to get out of it, because she's not familiar with the society. She has no contacts. She's alone and isolated. And I think that was really smart. And I very much dislike the reviews that hate the book because of that, when I'm like, that was the point of this book. So anyway, I really enjoyed this. I really recommend it if you want something a little bit different. I think, like I said, the ending kind of disappointed me a little bit. I think I get why it went that way, but it just felt very quick. I think this one is one that ended, like, wrapped everything up in like 50 pages, and I think it just felt like it needed a little bit more. I do like decisions that were made and how things were done, and I think the way that Mahit grappled with losing her culture to accept another one was really well done. And I think the choices she made in the very end, I won't spoil the very end because I don't think it was bad. So I do think it's worth the read still. It was like a solid 4 for me. So I recommend this if you want something a little bit different, with a very unique world building system. So thanks for hanging out. I will see you soon with something else.